On a stormy night, a poor young black man saw a pregnant woman struggling for her life on the roadside. He didn't know she was the wife of a billionaire, or that saving her would change his destiny forever. When the billionaire finally met him, his tears flowed at one unforgettable request. "Stay with me, because this is a story you'll never forget." This is a story of kindness, fate, and a life forever changed. Before we begin, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss stories that inspire and touch the heart. The rain hammered down on the city, washing the streets with silver reflections. It was late, almost midnight, and most people had already sought shelter. But for Derek, a young black man in his early 20s, the night had no comfort to offer. Derek worked 2 jobs, one at a mechanic shop during the day, and another cleaning offices at night. Life hadn't been fair to him, but his mother had raised him to believe one thing: kindness costs nothing, but it can change everything. So even though he was tired, with aching feet and a growling stomach, he didn't complain. He walked home through the storm because he couldn't afford the bus fare. As he passed a quiet road on the edge of town, Derek heard something strange, a cry for help. At first, he thought the storm was playing tricks on him. But then he saw it. A black luxury car swerved to the side of the road, hazard lights blinking, and a woman struggling to open the door. She was heavily pregnant, her face pale, one hand clutching her stomach as though she were in pain. Derek's heart leapt. He didn't know who she was, but he knew one thing: she needed help, and fast. Without hesitation, Derek ran toward the car, rain soaking him to the bone. "Ma'am, are you okay?" he shouted over the storm. The woman's lips trembled. "Please, the baby. I need to get to the hospital." Derek didn't think twice. He pulled the door open, helped her out, and supported her weight as lightning cracked across the sky. She was breathing heavily, every step a struggle. There were no taxis, no cars passing by. It was just them in the storm. Derek looked down the empty street, then back at the woman, and made a decision that would change his life forever. "Don't worry," he said firmly. "I'll get you there. Just hold on." As he guided her through the rain, Derek had no idea that this pregnant woman wasn't just anyone. She was the wife of one of the wealthiest billionaires in the country. And the choice he made tonight would lead him into a story of fate, tears, and one request that would break his heart. Derek's arm supported the woman's trembling body as they trudged through the rain. Every few steps, she let out a soft cry, clutching her belly tighter. Her face was pale, her breath sharp and uneven. "Stay with me," Derek urged, his voice steady though his own heart was pounding. "What's your name?" Between gasps, she managed. "Sophia. My name is Sophia." "All right, Sophia. I'm Derek. We're going to make it to the hospital. Just keep talking to me." The hospital wasn't far, maybe a 15-minute walk under normal conditions, but in the storm, with Sophia barely able to move, it felt like an eternity. Derek tried waving down every passing car, but the road was deserted. It was just him, the storm, and a woman about to give birth in the worst of circumstances. Finally, they reached a busier intersection where lights glowed faintly through the sheets of rain. Derek spotted a small diner still open, and without hesitation, he guided Sophia inside. The staff gasped as they saw her condition. "Call an ambulance, quick!" one of them shouted. Derek laid Sophia carefully into a booth, kneeling beside her. His clothes clung to his skin, soaked through, but he didn't care. He held her hand and whispered, "You're safe now. Help is coming." Minutes later, The wail of sirens cut through the storm. Paramedics rushed in, checking her pulse, speaking in clipped professional tones. One of them looked at Derek. "Good thing you found her when you did," the medic said. "Another 10 minutes out here, and both mother and child would have been in danger." Relief flooded Derek, but it didn't last long. As they lifted Sophia onto the stretcher, she turned her head weakly toward him. "Please, don't leave," she whispered. Her hand tightened around his for just a moment before the medics ushered her away. Derek froze. He didn't understand why she wanted him there, but something in her pleading eyes struck deep. So, against all odds, he climbed into the back of the ambulance. And as the doors slammed shut and the sirens wailed, Derek had no idea that this choice would bring him face to face with a billionaire, and lead to the request that would make his tears flow. The ambulance screeched into the emergency bay of the city hospital. Nurses and doctors were already waiting as they rushed Sophia inside. Derek followed, unsure if he even belonged there, but her earlier words echoed in his mind, "Don't leave." He waited outside the maternity ward, pacing back and forth. His clothes were still dripping wet, but he didn't notice. He just prayed she and the baby would be okay. Moments later, the sound of hurried footsteps filled the hallway. A tall man in an expensive tailored suit stormed in, flanked by 2 security guards. His presence commanded the room, Alexander Grant, one of the richest billionaires in the country. His empire stretched across real estate, technology, and finance. But right now, he wasn't the powerful mogul that appeared in magazines and on television. He was a frantic husband. "Where is she?" Alexander demanded, his voice trembling with fear. The doctor quickly reassured him. "She's stable, sir. We're monitoring both her and the baby. She'll be fine." Alexander's shoulders sagged in relief. That was when his eyes landed on Derek, drenched, exhausted, standing awkwardly in the corner of the hallway. "Who are you?" Alexander asked sharply, his voice still carrying authority. Derek swallowed nervously. I found your wife on the road. She needed help. I just couldn't leave her there." Alexander's expression softened, but only slightly. He studied Derek, scanning the soaked clothes, the tired eyes, the humility in his voice. One of the nurses spoke up. "If it weren't for him, sir, your wife might not have made it here in time." For the first time that night, Alexander's eyes glistened. He walked toward Derek, extended his hand, and gripped his firmly. "You saved the life of the 2 people who matter most to me," Alexander said, his voice low but filled with weight. "I owe you more than you can imagine." Derek shook his head quickly. "No, sir. You don't owe me anything. I just did what anyone would have done." But Alexander knew better. Not everyone would have stopped in the middle of a storm. Not everyone would have risked their time and comfort for a stranger. In that quiet moment, Derek had no idea that this meeting was only the beginning. For Alexander Grant was not a man who forgot debts of the heart. And soon he would make a request of Derek, one that would leave the young man in tears. The hospital waiting room was unusually quiet after the chaos of the storm. Derek sat on one of the hard plastic chairs, shivering slightly in his damp clothes. His mind replayed the events again and again, Sophia's pale face, her hand gripping his, the desperate plea not to leave her. Across the room, Alexander Grant was on his phone, giving rapid instructions to his team. His deep voice carried authority even in hushed tones. He paused occasionally, glancing at the doors that led to the maternity ward, his jaw tightening with every passing second. Finally, Alexander ended his call and walked over to Derek. The billionaire, usually surrounded by bodyguards and assistants, stood alone before the young man who had saved his wife. "You haven't eaten, have you?" Alexander asked. Derek blinked, surprised. "I'm fine, sir." "Really?" Alexander shook his head, then signaled to one of his men. Within minutes, food and a dry set of clothes were brought in. Derek hesitated, but accepted them with quiet gratitude. As the night stretched on, the two men sat in silence, bound by a strange connection neither of them fully understood. Alexander wasn't used to this kind of vulnerability, but tonight wasn't about wealth or power. It was about the fragile line between life and death, and the young stranger who had stood in the gap. Hours later, the doctor finally emerged with a tired but relieved smile. "Congratulations, Mr. Grant," he said warmly. "Both mother and child are safe. You have a healthy baby boy." Alexander's eyes shone with tears as he exhaled a breath he didn't realize he had been holding. He clasped the doctor's hand in gratitude before turning to Derek. "Come with me," he said firmly. Derek froze. "Me? Sir, I don't think—" But Alexander's tone left no room for argument. "You brought her this far. You deserve to see this moment too." Derek's heart pounded as he followed Alexander down the hallway. When they stepped into the room, Sophia lay in bed, glowing despite her exhaustion. In her arms was the tiny bundle of life Derek had unknowingly fought for that night. She looked up, her eyes finding Derek instantly. A tired smile spread across her face. "You kept your promise," she whispered. And in that moment, as Derek stared at the newborn, tears welled in his eyes. He had no family of his own, but tonight he felt as though he had gained something beyond understanding. Little did he know, Alexander was about to make him an offer, one request, that would shake him to his core. The soft cries of the newborn filled the hospital room. Sophia cradled the baby gently, her eyes shimmering with gratitude as she looked from Alexander to Derek. Alexander stood tall beside her bed, his usual commanding presence softened by fatherhood. But his gaze soon shifted to Derek, and for the first time, the billionaire's voice carried not authority, but humility. "Derek," Alexander began slowly, "I've built empires, signed billion-dollar deals, and employed thousands of people. But none of that matters compared to this moment. Tonight, you gave me something money could never buy. You gave me my family." Derek lowered his eyes, overwhelmed. "I just did what anyone would have done." Alexander shook his head. "No. Most people would have walked away. But you didn't. You stayed, even when you had nothing to gain." There was a long pause. Then Alexander's voice broke slightly as he continued. "I have one request of you, Derek." Derek's heart thudded in his chest. "Anything, sir." Alexander's eyes glistened as he glanced at his newborn son. "I want you to be his godfather." The words hung in the air like thunder. Derek's breath caught, his chest tightening. He blinked rapidly, as if he hadn't heard correctly. "Me, sir? I can't. I'm no one," Derek stammered, tears already pricking his eyes. But Sophia, still cradling the baby, smiled warmly. "You're not no one, Derek. You're the reason our son is alive. We want him to grow up knowing the kind of man who would risk everything for a stranger. We want him to know you." Derek's lips trembled as he covered his face with his hands, tears flowing freely. His entire life, he had struggled to be seen, to matter, to make a difference. And now, here in this room, a billionaire and his wife were entrusting him with the most precious thing in their lives. Alexander placed a firm hand on his shoulder. "You've already proven yourself more than worthy. Don't say no. Be part of his life. That's all I ask." Derek looked up through blurred vision, his voice breaking. I would be honored. Sophia guided the newborn closer to him. With shaking hands, Derek held the tiny boy for the first time. The child's small fingers curled around his thumb, and Derek's tears fell harder. For the first time in years, he didn't feel like a poor, forgotten young man. He felt like he belonged. And in that hospital room, with thunder rolling faintly in the distance, Derek's life changed forever. The following morning, sunlight spilled through the hospital windows, chasing away the darkness of the storm. Derek sat quietly in a chair near Sophia's bed, still in awe of the moment that had unfolded the night before. In his arms, the baby boy slept peacefully. Alexander entered the room, looking less like the untouchable billionaire he was known to be, and more like a man who had been given a second chance at life. He watched Derek with his son for a moment, his lips curving into the faintest smile. "His name is Matthew," Alexander said softly. Derek looked up. "Matthew," he repeated, tasting the name on his tongue. "It's perfect." Sophia nodded, her eyes warm. "Matthew already seems so calm in your arms, Derek. It's like he knows you were the one who brought him safely into this world." Derek swallowed hard, his chest tightening with emotions he hadn't felt in years. He had grown up without a father, and for much of his life, without guidance. But holding Matthew, he realized something. Perhaps God was giving him a role he never expected. Later that day, Alexander asked Derek to step outside into the hallway. The billionaire's usual stern tone was replaced with sincerity. "I don't care about the headlines or what the public thinks," Alexander began. "To me, loyalty is everything. And what you did for my family proves you're a man of loyalty and courage. I want you to stay close to us, not just as Matthew's godfather, but as part of our lives." Derek froze. "Sir, I don't know what to say. I don't belong in your world. I'm just a mechanic and a janitor." Alexander placed a hand firmly on his shoulder. "Titles and wealth don't make a man. Character does. And you have that in abundance. My son deserves to grow up with men like you around him." Tears welled again in Derek's eyes. For so long, he had been overlooked, unseen, unvalued. And now, one of the wealthiest men in the world was not only acknowledging him but inviting him into his family's life. In that moment, Derek silently vowed that he would live up to this trust. Not for money, not for recognition, but for Matthew, the child whose tiny hand had already touched his heart. And so, a new bond was forged that day, one between a billionaire, his wife, their newborn son, and a humble young man who had nothing but a heart of gold. 2 weeks later, Derek's life looked nothing like it had before that stormy night. Gone were the long, exhausting walks in the rain after cleaning offices. Gone were the nights of hunger, when he went to bed with an empty stomach but a hopeful prayer. Alexander had insisted on helping him, not with handouts, but with opportunities. Derek now worked at one of Alexander's auto companies, not sweeping floors, but learning mechanics under professional guidance. Alexander had seen the passion in his eyes when he spoke about cars, and he made sure Derek had the chance to chase that dream. But the biggest change wasn't the job or the better clothes he now wore, it was the people in his life. Every evening, Derek visited Sophia and little Matthew. The baby would smile whenever Derek held him, as if he knew that this was the man who had fought to bring him safely into the world. Sophia often said, "He feels safe with you," and Derek believed it. Sometimes, Alexander would watch from the corner of the room, quietly reflecting. He had all the wealth in the world, But money couldn't buy the kind of loyalty Derek had shown. And every time he saw Derek with Matthew, he knew he had made the right choice asking him to be godfather. One evening, while holding the baby, Derek whispered softly, "I promise, little one, no matter what, I'll always be here for you. You'll never feel the emptiness I once felt. You'll always have someone who cares." Sophia overheard those words, and her eyes filled with tears. She reached out and touched Derek's arm gently. "You've already given Matthew more than you realize, Derek. You've given him hope, and you've given us a family bond we never expected." For Derek, life had been a battle of survival. But now, he had found something greater than survival. He had found purpose. And though he still sometimes questioned why fate had chosen him, he never doubted one thing. His tears that night in the hospital had been the beginning of a new chapter, one filled with love, trust, and belonging. Months passed, and seasons changed. Derek's once uncertain life had blossomed into something he never imagined possible. Every weekend, he visited the Grant estate, a sprawling mansion that would have intimidated him once, but now felt welcoming. Sophia would greet him with warm smiles, Matthew would reach out excitedly for his arms, and Alexander, though still every bit the powerful businessman, treated Derek as an equal. On Matthew's christening day, the grand hall of the estate was filled with guests, politicians, celebrities, and business tycoons. Cameras flashed, but amid all the wealth and prestige, one figure stood humbly yet proudly at the front. Derek, dressed in a suit Alexander had personally gifted him. When the priest announced him as Matthew's godfather, Derek's eyes filled with tears once more. He glanced down at the child, who clutched his finger tightly, and felt an overwhelming sense of purpose. Later that evening, Alexander pulled him aside. "Derek, I know you never asked for any of this. But remember what I told you. Wealth doesn't define a man, character does. You've given my family something we can never repay." Derek shook his head, voice trembling. "No, sir. You gave me something too. You gave me a family when I had none. You gave me a reason to believe in myself again." Sophia joined them, her hand resting gently on Derek's arm. "Matthew will grow up knowing love not just from us, but from you too. You're part of this family now, Derek. That will never change." As night fell and the celebration wound down, Derek stepped outside for a moment of quiet. He looked up at the sky, the stars glimmering above, and whispered, "Mama, I hope you can see me now. I kept your lesson alive. Kindness really can change everything." And with tears streaming down his cheeks, Derek realized that a single act of selfless compassion had rewritten the story of his life forever. From a poor, overlooked young man to the godfather of a billionaire's son. A reminder to all who would hear his story. Kindness may seem small, but it carries the power to change destinies.